The server slipped the CEO a note. "Don't drink it and leave now." He grabbed her hand and said, "Come with me." The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Palace shimmered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung like crowns from the vaulted ceilings, casting a soft golden hue over the sea of tuxedos and satin gowns. A string quartet played a gentle waltz in the corner, and laughter echoed beneath the crystal lighting as servers glided through the crowd with silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Tonight was a celebration. Novatech Industries had just gone public in one of the most successful IPOs of the decade, and the world was watching. Investors, tech giants, and media elites had gathered to raise their glasses in honor of the company's meteoric rise. At the center of it all stood Aiden Hamilton, 34, the enigmatic CEO and founder. Clad in a tailored black tuxedo, he looked every bit the part. Confident, composed, magnetic. Yet behind the surface, his eyes told a quieter story. There was exhaustion in the lines at the corner of his mouth, tension in his jaw, years of pressure, of expectations, of fighting to prove himself. Raised in a San Diego group home, Aiden had fought his way out with nothing but a scholarship, a brilliant mind, and the kind of relentless will that left no room for failure. Now he stood atop the tech world, but even at the pinnacle, he felt something deeper, a disquiet he could not ignore. At the edge of the ballroom, Isabella Grayson, 26, moved quietly among the guests, a tray balanced effortlessly on one hand. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, professional and understated. But her eyes, brown and sharp, held something else beneath the surface. Worry, urgency, fear. She was not just a server. She worked nights at the Fairmont to support herself and her unborn child. 6 months pregnant, she had learned to hide her condition beneath the flowing black server's uniform, moving carefully through crowds, protecting the life growing inside her. Her 3-year-old daughter, Camila, waited in the staff room just down the hallway, coloring in her favorite unicorn book, dressed in her usual purple dress. Isabella had promised she would be back in time to walk her home after the event. But something had changed tonight. Moments earlier, she had overheard a conversation in the staff corridor. Something not meant to be heard. Men talking in hushed, urgent tones about a plan, a name, Aiden Hamilton, and a drink. Isabella's hands trembled slightly, but she controlled it. There was no time to hesitate. She moved through the crowd, weaving past guests, her heart pounding in her chest. One hand instinctively moved to her belly, a protective gesture she developed over the past months. Aiden had just stepped toward the podium. His champagne flute was in hand. A toast was coming. Isabella moved faster, navigating around guests with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to move for two. Just as he raised the glass, she approached, letting herself stumble slightly. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she gasped, tilting her tray just enough to bump into his arm. The champagne sloshed from his glass, splashing onto the floor and speckling the sleeve of his tuxedo. Aiden flinched, startled but composed. "I'm terribly sorry, sir," she said quickly, lowering her tray and pulling a cloth from her pocket. She dabbed at his sleeve with one hand, awkward, apologetic. With the other, unseen by all around them, she slipped a small folded note into his hand. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. She backed away, still apologizing, disappearing into the crowd before he could speak. Aiden stared after her for a moment, then looked down at the note in his hand. His fingers unfolded it slowly, the paper warm from her touch. For words stared back at him in hurried handwriting. "Do not drink. Leave now. They know you found out the truth." The words hit harder than the champagne. His breath caught. He looked up at the room, at the faces that had just been laughing and smiling and congratulating him. But now something shifted in his perception. The glances felt longer, the smiles sharper, the air thicker. People were watching him, but not in admiration. It felt colder, calculated. The ballroom was no longer a place of celebration. It was a stage. And suddenly, Aiden was the only one who did not know his part in the performance. His fingers closed over the note. His expression remained calm, unreadable. But inside, something had already begun to move. Aiden's expression did not change. He folded the note slowly, slipped it into his inner jacket pocket, and looked up, scanning the crowd. Then he saw her, the server with the dark bun, slipping into the far corner of the ballroom. Without drawing attention, he placed the untouched champagne flute back on the table. Then, calm and precise, he stepped down from the podium, weaving through clusters of guests. Every move was deliberate, unhurried, as if he were just mingling before his speech. Isabella reached the edge of the room near the staff corridor when she felt someone behind her. "Don't turn around," Aiden said quietly, his voice low and close. "I read your note." Isabella stiffened. Her fingers gripped the tray in her hands. "I need you to come with me," he continued. "We'll talk, but not here." He gently reached for her hand. She looked down, startled, then up at him. His expression gave nothing away, just a small, steady nod. Without speaking, they walked together toward the back of the ballroom. Aiden wore a faint smile like a host showing a guest around. Isabella followed, heart pounding, acutely aware of every step, every movement that might draw attention to her condition. A woman in a charcoal suit, one of the board members, stepped into their path, smiling slightly. "Aiden," she said smoothly, "sneaking away already?" Aiden kept his grip on Isabella's hand. "I'll be right back," he replied with a smile. "Just giving my guest here a quick tour." The woman glanced at Isabella, raising an eyebrow. "A tour?" Without hesitation, Aiden stepped closer to Isabella and slipped his arm around her shoulders. Carefully, as if he somehow sensed her vulnerability. He leaned in as if whispering something flirty. "Too many eyes," he said under his breath. "Not enough air." The woman hesitated, then chuckled. "Fair enough. Just don't miss your big toast." Aiden winked. "Wouldn't dream of it." Isabella offered a faint smile and a tilt of the head, selling the illusion. It worked. No one followed. They slipped through the side doors into a dim hallway leading to the staff area. Music and voices faded behind them. Aiden's grip tightened slightly. "Where's the service elevator?" Isabella pointed silently. They moved quickly, her steps light but careful, his stride long and steady. Inside the elevator, the doors slid shut with a soft chime. For the first time, they were alone. Isabella leaned against the wall, breathing hard, one hand resting on her belly. Aiden pressed the button for the basement. Silence hung heavy. As the elevator descended, Aiden turned to her. "Talk," he said. Isabella nodded. Her voice trembled but was urgent. "I overheard two men talking in the VIP lounge behind the ballroom. One of them, I think, is on your board. They mentioned you found something you weren't supposed to. One of them said, 'It ends tonight.'" Aiden's jaw clenched. "I wasn't supposed to be near there," she said. "But I took a shortcut through the service hallway. The door was open just enough. I didn't hear it all, but one of them said, 'Once he drinks, we move forward.'" Aiden said nothing, staring at the elevator doors as his mind raced. "I couldn't ignore it," she added quickly. "I didn't know who to trust. I didn't even know if you'd believe me." He turned to her, and for the first time, she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not suspicion, not authority, gratitude. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. The elevator dinged. The doors opened into the shadowy service corridor below. Aiden stepped out first, scanned the empty hallway, then looked back at her. "Come on," he said. "We don't have long." The storage room in the basement was dimly lit, its concrete walls lined with folded banquet chairs and used linens and crates of bottled water. The low hum of the building's boiler echoed faintly through the space, but all Isabella could hear was her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Aiden closed the door behind them, locking it quietly. He scanned the room once, then turned to face her. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice low and calm. Isabella nodded, still catching her breath. Her hands twisted nervously in front of her, fingers wringing the edge of her apron. She felt the baby shift inside her, a small flutter that reminded her of what was at stake. "It happened maybe 20 minutes before the toast," she began. "I was cutting through the back hallway, just trying to save time. There's a shortcut near the kitchen that leads past the VIP lounge." The door to the lounge was open, just a crack. Aiden listened intently, his expression unreadable. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop," she continued quickly. "But I heard voices, angry low, so I stopped. She swallowed hard, reliving the moment. There were 3 men inside. 2 I didn't recognize, but the third, I realized it was Mr. Thornton. I've seen him at the hotel before. He's on your company's board, isn't he? Aiden gave a slow nod. Vice chairman. Been with Novatech since the beginning. Isabella's voice dropped to a whisper. They were talking about you. His jaw tightened. One of the men said. She paused, trying to recall the exact words. He said, he thinks he can hide the internal report at home. It all ends tonight. That champagne will be his last. Aiden didn't react, but his gaze sharpened. Then the other one said something like, we'll sign the new contracts the moment he's gone. If we don't move now, everything he uncovered will destroy us. Isabella shook her head. I didn't understand what they meant at first, but it was clear they were planning to get rid of you tonight. A heavy silence settled over the room. Aiden turned away, bracing his hands on the edge of a storage shelf. He exhaled, slow and long. I knew something was wrong, he said quietly. I just didn't realize how far they'd go. He straightened and looked at her, his voice steady. About a week ago, I was reviewing a quarterly audit when I noticed some inconsistencies in one of our subsidiary accounts, specifically a charity branch we set up 3 years ago. He paced slowly, as if organizing his thoughts aloud. On the surface, everything checked out. But the deeper I looked, the worse it got. Fake vendors, inflated expenses, money meant for outreach and medical grants, siphoned off into private accounts. Isabella's eyes widened. By Mr. Thornton? I don't have definitive proof yet, Aiden replied. But I traced enough of the paper trail to know this wasn't just negligence. It was deliberate. He paused, then added, I was planning to take it to the board next week. I thought I had time to build the case. Isabella stepped closer, her voice shaking slightly. But someone found out. Aiden gave a slow, grim nod. 3 days ago, I got an anonymous message. Just one sentence. Drop it or you'll regret it. I thought it was just a threat. Empty words. I've had worse thrown at me over the years. He looked down at the floor, his voice softening. I underestimated how much was at stake, and how far they'd go to protect it. Isabella's hands were still trembling, one resting protectively on her belly. If I hadn't overheard them. You did, Aiden interrupted gently. You acted. You warned me. That alone might have saved my life tonight. Their eyes met. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of what had almost happened pressing in from all sides. Somewhere above them, the sound of music still echoed faintly from the ballroom. But down here, in this hidden corner of the hotel, the air was colder, the stakes infinitely higher. We can't go back up there, Isabella whispered. No, Aiden agreed. But we're not going to run either. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded note she had given him. This changes everything, he said. Now we move carefully, and we move together. Aiden stood still for a long moment, processing everything Isabella had just told him. The room around them felt tighter now, as if the walls themselves understood the weight of the truth. We can't stay here, he finally said. We need to get you out of this building. Quietly, Isabella looked down nervously, twisting her fingers. I can't leave yet, she said. My daughter, Camila, she's waiting for me at the back entrance. I told her I'd be done by 10. Aiden's expression softened. She's here? In the hotel. Isabella nodded, one hand moving to her belly again. She always comes with me when I work night shifts. I don't have anyone else to watch her. She hesitated. And with the baby coming, I need every shift I can get. For the first time, Aiden's eyes moved to where her hand rested. Understanding flickered across his face. Then we go get her now, he said, his voice firm but gentle. He led Isabella through a series of narrow service corridors, bypassing the main elevator shafts and security stations. Every corner they turned felt like a new risk, every echo behind them a possible danger. But Aiden remained composed, his presence grounding Isabella even as her heart raced. At the end of one hallway, they reached the emergency stairwell. Aiden pushed open the heavy steel door and motioned for her to go first. Careful on the stairs, he said quietly. The stairwell was dim and industrial, smelling faintly of dust and old concrete. They descended in silence, footsteps soft and urgent. Isabella moved deliberately, one hand on the railing, the other on her belly. At the bottom, he led her through the employee-only exit that opened into the narrow alley behind the hotel. The air outside was sharp and cold, and Isabella's breath rose in small clouds. "There," she whispered, pointing to the far end of the alley. A small figure sat on a bench tucked into the shadows, legs swinging, wearing a purple dress that stood out like a jewel in the dark. "Camila," Isabella called gently, breaking into a careful jog. The little girl looked up, beamed, and ran toward her mother, arms outstretched. "Mommy, I was starting to get cold," she said, her voice light and innocent. Aiden followed behind, silent, watching them. Isabella bent down, awkwardly, protectively, and hugged her daughter tightly. When she looked up, Aiden was already removing his tuxedo jacket. Without a word, he knelt in front of Camila, draped the jacket around her small shoulders, and gently pulled it snug. "Sorry we're late," he said, his voice soft and warm. "But your mommy just did something very brave." Camila looked up at him with wide eyes. "Is she in trouble?" "No," he smiled. "She helped someone. She helped me." Camila blinked, then nodded solemnly, as if she somehow understood more than her years allowed. She reached out and took Aiden's hand, small fingers wrapping around his. Isabella stood motionless for a moment, overwhelmed. The cold night, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it had crushed down on her shoulders for so long. The weight of working while pregnant, of raising a child alone, of wondering how she'd manage when the baby came. And yet, here was this man, powerful, composed, now crouched beside her daughter, treating them like they mattered. No one had ever done that before. Aiden stood, gently lifting Lily into his arms. "We're not going home just yet," he said, looking at Isabella. "But you're both safe now." She nodded, unable to speak, her throat thick with emotion. Aiden reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He stepped a few feet away, dialing quickly. "Daniel, it's me," he said, his tone quiet but firm. "I need you right now. No questions." He paused. "Back alley entrance of the Fairmont." He paused, listening. "Yes. And bring your bag. We may not have long." He hung up and turned back to them. "A friend of mine is on his way. Someone I trust. He used to be Chicago PD. Left the force a few years ago. Got tired of the red tape. He's a private investigator now. Smart. Careful. Name's Daniel Brooks." Isabella nodded slowly. "And you trust him?" "With my life," Aiden said. She looked at him, really looked. For the first time, her eyes met his without fear, without distance. Something unspoken passed between them. Something simple and human. Trust. And maybe the beginning of something even more. The black SUV rolled quietly through the San Francisco streets, away from the glittering lights of the Fairmont Palace and into quieter neighborhoods. Isabella sat in the back seat with Lily curled against her, already dozing off beneath Aiden's jacket. One hand rested on her daughter's back, the other on her belly, feeling the reassuring movements of the life inside her. Aiden sat beside them, silent, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. They arrived 20 minutes later at a modest Victorian townhouse nestled between two towering glass buildings. It was the kind of place that went unnoticed, a structure with charm but no extravagance. Aiden led them up a narrow staircase and unlocked the door to a second-floor apartment. "Here," he said softly. "You'll be safe." Isabella stepped inside and paused. She had imagined glass walls, high-tech panels, maybe even a private elevator. But instead, the space was surprisingly simple. Warm wood floors, shelves filled with books and framed photographs, a worn leather couch, and soft lighting. It felt lived in, not staged. She looked at him with new eyes. "This doesn't look like a billionaire's place," she murmured. Aiden gave a faint smile. "That's because it isn't. It's mine." He gestured toward the hallway. "The guest room is down there. You can put Lily to bed if you'd like." Isabella nodded and carefully carried her sleeping daughter down the hall, moving slowly, mindful of her own balance and the baby she carried. Aiden waited until the door closed before moving to a cabinet near his desk. He reached behind a row of books and pressed a small latch. A panel slid open, revealing a small wall safe. He dialed in the code, paused for a second, then opened it. Inside was a stack of folders neatly labeled, along with a flash drive and a leather-bound notebook. He pulled out the top folder and placed it on the desk. Isabella returned a few minutes later, looking quieter, more composed. She watched as Aiden sat and opened the folder, spreading out several pages. "These," he said, tapping the papers, "are copies of internal audits from our subsidiary offices. One in particular, a charitable foundation we launched 3 years ago, raised too many red flags." He slid one sheet toward her. Isabella leaned over, scanning the page. "There's a pattern," he continued. "Payments to shell companies, vendors who don't exist, funds earmarked for cancer research being redirected to operating expenses that can't be accounted for. Over $5 million gone." Isabella's brows furrowed. "Who signed off on these?" Aiden hesitated. "Thornton and 2 others who likely never questioned the numbers. The reports were doctored, subtle, but the discrepancies are there if you know where to look." He pulled out the flash drive next. "I was going to present all this next week during the board's private review. I wanted to have everything airtight. The legal team was preparing documents. I even hired an external firm to confirm my findings." Isabella sat across from him, her voice quiet. "But someone found out." Aiden nodded slowly, "and decided it would be easier if I disappeared before I could speak." He sat back, exhaling through his nose. "You showing up tonight, it changed everything. If you hadn't warned me, I would have taken that drink. And this," he motioned to the papers, "would have died with me." Isabella looked at the documents, then back at him. "So what now?" He met her eyes. "Now we finish what I started." She nodded. Outside, the city carried on, horns blaring, lights flickering, lives rushing past each other in anonymous streams. But in that quiet apartment, under the soft light of a single desk lamp, something important was happening. 2 strangers were becoming allies. Not by chance, by choice. 2 days later, the boardroom on the top floor of Novatech Industries was filled with tension disguised as confidence. The emergency meeting had been called by Vice Chairman Thornton, an urgent review of transitional leadership in light of Aiden's unexplained absence. Around the long glass table, familiar faces gathered. Directors, legal advisors, department heads. Polished shoes, tailored suits, calm expressions masking quiet unrest. Everyone wondered the same thing. Had Aiden Hamilton really disappeared? Or was he planning something? Thornton called the meeting to order, tapping his fingers on the glossy surface. "Mr. Hamilton has taken an indefinite leave. We need to move forward. Interim leadership. Pending contracts. Let's begin." At the far end of the room, a young woman entered in a catering uniform, carrying a tray of coffee. "Coffee, gentlemen?" she asked politely, her voice soft. No one gave her more than a glance. Isabella, hidden beneath the uniform, moved with practiced grace, setting cups at each seat. Her pregnancy was easier to conceal beneath the loose catering jacket. Her dark hair was tucked into a black cap, her eyes cast downward. But she heard everything. Beneath her tray was a small transmitter, and inside the air vent across the room, Daniel Brooks's hidden recorder picked up every word. 2 blocks away, inside a nondescript surveillance van, Daniel sat with headphones on, monitoring the feed. Next to him, Aiden leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. Then it happened. Edward Crane, a legal advisor in his 50s, shifted in his seat and muttered under his breath, unaware his mic picked it up. "Even if he has the originals, it's too late. He's probably on a plane or buried somewhere." Someone let out a low chuckle. Another board member added, "If he's smart, he'll stay gone. We've already locked in the votes." Thornton didn't respond, but the hint of a smirk curled on his face. In the van, Daniel pressed a small button on the transmitter, a silent signal. Inside the boardroom, Isabella took a slow step back. Then the doors opened. Heads turned. Aiden Hamilton stepped inside, calm, composed, and unmistakably alive. The room froze. The air turned to ice. Thornton stood halfway from his chair, pale. "Aiden, we weren't expecting." "I'm sure you weren't," Aiden said coolly, striding to the head of the table. He wore a charcoal gray suit, no tie, sleeves casually rolled. He looked every bit the man who had built the company with his own hands. He paused at the end of the table, scanning the room. "Please," he said, "don't get up on my account." No one moved. "I heard concerns about my absence," he said. "Understandable. I needed time to think, to collect a few facts." He set his briefcase on the table, opened it, and slid a thick folder across the glass. "You know," he said, eyes locking with Thornton. "It's bold, deciding the future of a company based on the assumption that its founder is either dead or too afraid to return." Thornton tried to speak, but Aiden raised a hand. "No explanations. I've already heard enough." He addressed the full board now, voice calm but firm. "This folder contains financial records, email threads, shell account details, and names. Copies have already been sent to federal investigators, our legal counsel, and, if needed, the press." A ripple of alarm moved through the room. Aiden leaned forward, both hands on the table. "And in case anyone still thinks this is a bluff, I've sent encrypted copies to 3 independent legal firms. If anything happens to me, this information goes public." He straightened slowly and turned to Thornton. "I wanted to believe this company could fix itself from within. I gave people chances. I believed in discretion." He paused, then delivered the final blow, voice low but crystal clear. "But the truth didn't die. I didn't die, and neither did the evidence." Silence. The room, once so certain, was now undone. The balance of power had just shifted. 3 days later, the press conference at Novatech headquarters drew a full crowd. Cameras lined the back wall. Lights blazed from every angle, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Reporters, shareholders, and staff filled the room, some anxious, some hopeful, all waiting for answers. Aiden Hamilton stood at the front, composed in a navy blue suit, no tie. To his left, company counsel. To his right, a screen displaying the Novatech logo and one bold word beneath it, transparency. He approached the podium and scanned the crowd. "Thank you for being here," he began. "I speak today not just as CEO, but as someone who came close to losing everything because I refused to look the other way." He let the silence settle before continuing. "In recent weeks, I discovered serious misconduct within one of our charitable arms. A foundation meant to fund medical outreach had instead been used to divert millions into private accounts, signed off by members of our own board." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. "Using documentation and the support of outside investigators, I've turned over all evidence to federal authorities. Arrests have been made. Novatech is cooperating fully." Phones buzzed. Reporters began typing. But Aiden kept his gaze steady. This moment isn't only about corruption. It's about courage. About choosing truth when silence feels safer. He paused, then gestured to the edge of the stage. None of this would have been possible without one person, someone who saw something wrong and chose to act. All heads turned as Isabella Chun walked onto the stage. She wore a simple navy dress that flowed gracefully over her now obvious pregnancy. Her dark hair fell in soft waves. Her posture was composed. Though nervous, she held her chin high. The event host took the mic and smiled. "This is Isabella Chun, a part-time server who refused to stay silent. In doing so, she saved not only the life of our CEO, but the future of this company." The room erupted in applause. Isabella hesitated. Then Aiden held out his hand. She took it. As they stood together, the applause grew louder. There was no hierarchy between them now, just mutual respect. Then Aiden stepped forward again. From the front row, he reached down and gently lifted a small figure onto the stage. Lily, in her familiar purple dress, clutching a tiny stuffed unicorn. The room went quiet. Lily blinked under the lights, looking up at Aiden with wide eyes. He knelt beside her and lowered the mic. "If we want to raise children who are brave, honest, and kind," he said, "we have to show them what that looks like." He looked toward Isabella, then back at the crowd. Sometimes it only takes one voice. One person who says, "This is wrong," when no one else will. He rose to his feet and placed Lily's hand gently in Isabella's. The three of them stood side by side, an unlikely trio, united by truth. And in that moment, the applause returned. Not out of politeness, but from something real. It was thunderous, rising to fill every corner of the hall. It was applause for truth. for courage, for light, and for the people who choose to see and say what others are afraid to. Spring returned to San Francisco with soft winds and blooming magnolias, brushing color back into the city after a long winter. Life at Novatech had changed, radically, but for the better. In the weeks following the public revelation, the company launched sweeping reforms. The toxic leadership was gone. Trust, once broken, was slowly being rebuilt. And at the center of it all, Aidan Hamilton remained. Still CEO, but now a different kind of leader. He no longer led from behind glass walls. He walked the halls. He listened. He shook hands with interns and janitors the same way he did with board members. And when he needed reminding of why he stayed, he often visited the employee relations office, where Isabella Chun now worked full-time. Isabella had been offered high-profile roles, but she chose the one where she could make the greatest difference, helping entry-level staff, interns, and part-timers, people just like she had once been, feel seen and heard. She wasn't just good at it. She was extraordinary. Her ability to connect, to sense when someone was struggling or afraid to speak up, made her indispensable. Aidan once told a colleague, "She has an empathy radar, something you can't teach or program." Meanwhile, Lily thrived. With a full scholarship through Novatech's new outreach fund, she was attending a prestigious prep school downtown. Still in her favorite purple dress, she carried a sticker-covered backpack and filled her notebooks with stories, tales of quiet heroes who used their voices, not swords. And in late spring, when the magnolias were in full bloom, Isabella gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Thomas, after her father, who had taught her that doing the right thing mattered more than doing the easy thing. Aidan was there at the hospital that day, arriving with flowers and a stuffed bear for Lily. He sat with them for hours, holding the baby with surprising gentleness, while Lily chatted about her school day. It was in that moment, watching him cradle her newborn son with the same care he'd shown her daughter in that cold alley months ago, that Isabella realized something had shifted. This wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was something deeper. Inspired by all that had happened, Aidan took another bold step. He launched a nonprofit dedicated to protecting and empowering whistleblowers, people who risk everything to speak the truth. He called it the Echo Project, and he asked Isabella to be his co-founder. At first, she hesitated. "I'm not a leader," she said. But Aidan smiled. "You already are." He stayed on as senior advisor while Isabella helped shape the mission. Together, they built a network supporting whistleblowers through legal help, education, and, most importantly, a place to be heard. Isabella also found a new voice through writing. One quiet night, with Thomas asleep in her arms and Lily curled beside her, she sat down at her laptop and began typing their story. From the spilled champagne to the whispered warning. From fear to truth. She titled the post, "The Note That Changed Everything." It went viral within days. People from around the world shared their own stories in the comments. Stories of courage, regret, and hope. Stories from those who had spoken up and those who wished they had. Isabella hadn't expected it, but Aidan wasn't surprised. Truth, he told her, has a way of echoing. One golden afternoon, as spring leaned into summer, the four of them sat on a park bench beneath the wide shade of a maple tree. Lily sat between Aidan and Isabella, licking strawberry ice cream, her legs swinging in rhythm with a quiet breeze. Isabella wore a light blue dress, her dark hair loose and catching the light. In her arms, baby Thomas slept peacefully, wrapped in a soft blanket. Aidan leaned back, hands folded behind his head, watching the world go by. There was no rush, just stillness. Then Lily looked up and asked, "Do you think everyone will be brave someday?" Aidan turned to her, then glanced at Isabella, the corners of his mouth lifted. "I think," he said, "one brave voice can help a lot of others find their own." Isabella smiled, her eyes meeting his. In them, he saw everything that mattered: courage, hope, and the quiet promise of a future they were building together. And as the sun dipped low, casting amber light across the grass, his voice echoed softly, closing the chapter with words now etched into hearts everywhere. "They told me to stay silent. But a woman with nothing but a small piece of paper reminded me that truth deserves a voice. Thank you for reading this powerful story of courage and truth. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that bravery doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers through a folded note, a quiet warning, or a hand held in the dark, please consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. Stories like these remind us that one voice, one choice, one moment of courage can change everything. From all of us, thank you for believing in the power of truth, kindness, and the human spirit. Stay kind, stay brave,